So when I opened my computer today, Windows decided to do an hour-long update. And what that did is mess up my mic. So I just recorded a full video with no sound. Anyways, here we go for a second try. This video is brought to you by our own Meta. Thank you so much for donating. If you want to support Brackeys yourself, you can go to patreon.com/Brackeys.
Thanks for tuning in at Brackeys.
Hello everyone and welcome to this video on creating a tower defense game in Unity. Today we'll be making some functionality for selecting turrets. So whenever we click on a turret on our map, we'll have a cool UI pop up right above that turret with some options for upgrading and selling the turret. Today we won't be making the actual functionality for upgrading and selling it. We'll only be keeping track of what turret is currently selected and showing the UI in cool ways. And then in future videos, we can actually take a look at doing those two things. The reason why I chose to do this video today is because in the last one I asked you what you wanted to see, and an overwhelming amount of you said upgrades and a lot of you said selling as well. So I thought this was a pretty important video to get out of the way in order to do all of that stuff. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. So as you can see, I'm here in Unity, and what I want to begin with is just kind of sketch out the UI. So in order to do this, let's bring in a turret that we can use as a reference point. So let's find our standard turret and just drag it into the scene, and you can see it places it right here. Then let's create an empty object, and we'll call this one our node UI. So we could also call it select UI or turret UI, whatever. This is going to store our two buttons, and you could definitely implement information about the turret here as well. So if you want to be able to inspect turrets to see more about them, such as health or cost or stuff like that, you can implement it into this UI very easily. So what we'll do is have this sit right on top of our turret. So let's find our standard turret, copy the transform component of that, and paste it onto our node UI. And the reason why is whenever we want to select different turrets, we'll have this node UI move to the position of that turret. So right now when building it, we want to make sure it lines up with our reference. Awesome. So what we can do now is pretty much just shift into 2D mode and create a child object of this, and this is going to be a canvas. And right now you can see our canvas is huge. That's because it's currently in screen space overlay. We want this to be part of the world space. So let's change it to world space, and let's also change the scale to 0.07, 0.07, and again on the Z. Then we can hit F to focus in on it, and you can see that currently it sits not really in the right place. So let's just hit reset on the rect transform, and that actually modifies our scale here. So we'll just change that very quickly again here. And I keep hitting 8 there, so 0.07 and 0.07. There we go. So now hit F and you can see it sits in the right place. Now let's move this up a bit to offset it. Let's also kind of make it not quite as tall. And let's definitely widen it to something like 210. And I'm just going to write it out here. So I actually kind of like the look of this. We might need it to be a bit taller. Then what we can do is right click on this, go UI and then panel. And this of course has an image, and you can definitely keep this in case you want this panel to have some kind of background. But since we'll only have like 2 buttons and then a arrow pointing to the turret, I don't think it's necessary for us to have that. So let's just disable the image for now. One thing that we do want to add is another component here called the horizontal layout group. And this will just nicely lay out our 2 buttons when we create them. We'll also make sure to rename this here to something like buttons. So let's now right click on this, go on the UI and create our first button. And let's quickly duplicate this by hitting Ctrl D or Command D if you're on the Mac. So now you can see it easily scales these. So let's set up the first one. So let's go into text and let's make this upgrade. And we can also put an amount in here. So let's say that it costs $100 to upgrade it. We'll of course make this change depending on what turret you have selected, but that is probably for a later video. So what we can do is then change the font here, and I want to use the Roboto medium. And what I also want to do is have this upgrade part be a lot more or a lot bigger or fat or more clear than on the actual cost. So in order to do that, let's just mark this as bold using these easy HTML tags inside of our text. And you can see that will make only that text bold. Also, right now, focus on the scene view and don't look over at the game view. It's looking a bit weird at the moment, and that's because we haven't rotated the UI, which I plan to do in a second. It's just very much easier to build it out first, with it being just in its standard position with its 0 rotation, and then rotate it afterwards. So now let's make this completely white, and let's also change the font size to something like 18. And then let's change the background. I want the background to be kind of gray blue and a bit transparent as well. So we'll just add a bit of transparency there. And I want it to be kind of like what you see down here. But I don't want to just copy the color. You can do that, but I want to be able to just fine tune it here because you might need it to be more or less visible than what you have down here. Awesome, so I kind of like the look of this. So what we'll do is take our secondary button here, delete it. We'll call this one our upgrade button, and we'll duplicate that and call this one cell. And we'll change the text in here to cell, and the amount here to something like 50. So this is already looking pretty good. What we can then do is find our buttons here and drag these up, because I want to be very clear that this UI relates to this particular turret. So let's make a small little arrow that points down towards that turret. To do this, we go under the canvas, right click, go UI, and then image. And let's change the image here to the drop down arrow. And this is included with Unity by default. You can also find your own arrow on Google. Just make sure that you are free to use it. Or you could, of course, easily make this in Photoshop or GIMP. I'm just going to be using the default one here, but you can do whatever you want. I think this works pretty great. The only thing is it isn't super high resolution. It's only 40 by 40. So if you really zoom in on this, you're going to notice that. But I think for what we're doing here, it's going to be just fine. Awesome. So I like the look of that. And then I just want to tint it a bit blue. Something like that, and make it a bit transparent as well. Just kind of in line with the other elements. Awesome. And I'm going to rename this to arrow. And what we can do now is pretty much position this correctly inside of our world space. So let's switch out of 2D now, and let's rotate this. So as you can see, my cat is joining in here. Look, say hi. Hello. Yeah, the light is blinding her. Awesome. So what we can do here is rotate this over and move it so that it's kind of in this 35-degree angle and pointing towards our turret. Because at the moment you can see it doesn't look super great. So to do this, we can go and select our canvas and rotate this by 35 degrees. And then we can easily offset this canvas. Because our node UI will stay at this position, we can do whatever we want with this. So let's now just move it over and maybe move it down a bit as well. This way it points nicely towards our turret, and it looks a lot better inside of our game view, especially when we zoom in here. So it puts it inside of our world in a really awesome way. So cool. So what we can also do is maybe, I actually want to rotate this by even more. I think, no, 35 is better. All right, we'll stick with 35, but you can choose whatever. And of course, fine tune this stuff. I just jump over it very quickly to demonstrate it. So let's now delete our standard turret, and let's take our node UI here and move it to the top just so we can easily find it. And let's also take our event system and move it to the bottom. Now I think everything is nicely grouped. And what we can do is, of course, make this interactive. So what we want to do is have some place that keeps track of what turret is currently selected. In fact, I want it to work in such a way that we can only either have a turret selected that we want to build, or have a turret selected in the world. We don't want to have both things at once because it could quickly complicate our code and maybe even make it confusing for the user. So what we'll do is implement this into the place where we select or where we keep track of what turret we want to build. And we do that inside of our build manager. So let's double click on that to open it up in Visual Studio. And we just want to add a few things in here. It's not too complicated. So at the place where we declare our variables, you can see that we currently have a private turret blueprint called the turret to build. In here, we want to create a private node as well called Deselect Node. You could also call it the selected turret, whatever you want to do, but I'm going to select the actual node here. And then down here at the bottom, you can see we have a function called select turret to build. We want to just make a separate one here called select node, which instead of taking in a turret, is going to take in a node, and it's just going to set selected node equal to that node that was passed in. However, because we want to only be able to have either a node or a turret selected at one point or a turret to build, we can easily go in here and set turret to build equal to null, and go in here and set selected node equal to null. This way, when we enable one, we disable the other. Great. So this isn't actually implemented into the UI, but it is implemented into the build manager, which means that if we go ahead and actually call this select node inside of our node, we should be able to see this working in the game. So to do that, we find our node script. So just find that in here. And you can see under the function called onMouseDown, we check, are we currently clicking a UI element, in which case we just want to ignore it. If we're not, well, then we want to make sure that we can actually build there, that our build manager is ready to build. And this is what I want to move down, because we want to do this regardless if we only want to do this in case there's no turret there. So if there's no turret there, we want to try to build. So we want to make sure to check if we can build. And if we can't, we call build manager.build turret on, and we pass in this node. So we tell our build manager to build a turret here. However, what we want to change is this if statement. So we say if the turret is not equal to null, meaning if there's already a turret sitting on this object or on this node. Well, so far we've just returned and said we can't build there. What we want to do instead is simply select that node. So we do build manager, and just like selecting or building turrets down here, we go build manager dot select node, and we pass in ourselves. So when we click on that node, and if it has something selected, we're going to select that node. Awesome. So the way that we can see this working in the game right away is if we hit play, you can see currently right off the bat, we don't have any hover animation. If we then select one of these turrets, let's just select the first one, we do have a hover animation, and we can keep on choosing these. It's the same with the other ones. So now we have this one selected, we still have a hover animation. But if I now select one of the turrets, say this one, that hover animation disappears. And that's because we currently don't have a turret to build selected. We have this node selected. And the way that we can actually see this is if we just go over to our inspector, select our game master, and change from normal to debug mode on the inspector, we can see that under our build manager, the selected node, despite it being a private variable, because we're inside of our debug mode, we can actually see it. And we can see that it points to node 37. So if we now click that and go here, you can see that is that turret. And if we select our game master, you can see that that variable updates as we select the different turrets. So it is actually working, but it's not really being showed anywhere. And this is where our UI comes in. So what we want to do now is kind of create a script on our Node UI that is responsible for, well, hooking up our upgrade and sell buttons at a later point. But for now, we want this to be able to move around the UI and hide it when it's not necessary. So let's create a Node UI script like this. And let's double click this to open it up as well. And I'm going to have to take a sip of water. Awesome, and let's keep going. So the first thing that we want is, of course, to keep track of what our current target is. What is the node that is selected that we're displaying the UI for? And to do that, we just create a private variable here, which we can call target, and it's going to be of type node. Then we are going to have a public function, a public void, that is reserved for setting the target. So we want to be able to call this on our build manager. In here, we want to, whenever selecting a node, we want to be able to have some kind of reference to our UI. So we'll go something like node UI, and then we want to go dot, and then set target, and then we want to pass in the node that is the target. So in order to do this, what we do is of course take in a parameter with that target. And of course we don't want to call this target because then we don't know what is this target and what is this target. What you could do is then go this.target, which implies the field up here that is part of the class, equals whatever passed in, which is this one. And this would work, but what I like to do instead is just rename this to underscore target, so to make it very clear that this is passed in here and this is the variable that sits on the class. Just make sure you differentiate. Some people like doing really shorthand notation, just writing T there, and you can do that as well. Just do whatever suits you. Awesome, so we have now set that target, and then we want to of course change our position. So we can set our transform.position equal to target dot and then get build position. And the reason why we don't just use target.transform.position is because that is the very center of our node. And if we look at our nodes here, that is inside of the actual block. And we don't want that. We want it to be just at the top of our block where our actual turret is sitting. So that is why we're using target.getBuildPosition, because that takes the center of our node and just offsets it with, I believe it was 0.5. Cool. So that should actually make our UI update and move around the screen. So if we now go into our build manager and make a reference to this node UI, and we are already calling the function here, so we simply need to make this variable here accessible. So let's go in here and create a public, and we're going to make this of type node UI and call this one node UI, and we can drag this inside of the inspector. We can reference that in the inspector. So now node UI.setTarget node is going to go over here, set the target, and move the UI. So that's pretty much all we needed to do here. So if we then go inside of our game master, you can see we now have a field called node UI where we want to drag in our node UI. Cool. And the selected node is assigned, but it's not used, not yet, but it will be. So let's now hit play, and we should see that this just sits there for now. But if we then go in here and build some different turrets and click on them, the UI moves to show what turret is currently selected, and it does so beautifully. So the next thing is of course disabling this UI whenever we have a turret to build selected. Then we want this to expire. And what we also want to do is have some way of toggling this UI on and off, because in case we have multiple turrets like above each other, the UI might get in the way. And that's annoying, so we want some way of toggling it off by clicking the turret once again. In order to do this, let's create a function in here called public void, and then let's call that hide. And all we need to do here is have a reference to our canvas, which sits under our node UI, so that we can easily just enable and disable that. It's the easiest thing to do. So we'll have it be disabled by default, and then we can go into a node UI, create a I'll do this on top of everything else. A public, and we'll just make this a game object, and we'll just call this UI. What we then do in our hide function is we go UI.setActive and we go false. And inside of our set target, of course, we want to enable it again. So we go UI.setActive and we go true. Awesome. And then we need to call that hide method inside of our build manager. And then we of course do that whenever we select a turret to build. So when we select a node, we set a target and it's enabled again. And whenever we select a turret to build, we go node UI dot hide. It's that easy. So now we should see that, oh, we need to do that reference there. So node UI, drag in the canvas there into the UI slot. So if we now hit play, we should see that it's disabled by default. We do these three turrets, and when we select one of them, it appears. And when we select one of the turrets down here, it is gone. However, we still have the issue where we can't really toggle it on and off. And so the UI might obstruct the user from doing different things that he wants to do. So in order to do that, and that is a super simple thing, is we just go in here and see if the node that we want to select, so inside of our select method, if the node passed in is equal to the already selected node, well then we want to simply hide the UI. and set the selected node equal to null. So we say if our selected node is equal to the node that we passed in, well, then we want to deselect the node. So we want to go deselect node, and then return out of that function. And then we create our deselect node. And I'm just going to make this public so that you can deselect nodes from other places as well. And we might want to do nodes here. Let's just do node. So that if you have something that happens in your game, say the user clicks on something else, then you can easily go in here and deselect the node. And all we want to do here is simply go selected node equals null and node UI dot hide. And if you notice, that's the exact same thing that we're doing down here. So let's just turn that into this single function call. So we'll just deselect the node. Awesome. That just makes everything really, really simple. So I believe that was all we needed to do. That was all the core functionality. If we now just close that, hit play, we should see that if we go in here, create some different turrets of different types, that we're able to select these different turrets. And if I double click on one of them, it will hide it. So I can toggle it on and off on the different turrets. So that's freaking awesome. And we can go in here and build all the different turrets, and it will just work immediately because we are using the same central script, which is our node script, no matter what turret we're using. And this is why object-oriented programming can be so strong, is because we can have this idea of different instances and different types even sharing another script, sharing a type called the node. Awesome. So the last thing that I wanted to do is just create a quick little animation for whenever this UI element first appears. So I think when it switches from one turret to another, that's fine that it's just instant. And when it's removed again, I think it should be instant as well. However, when it is first introduced into the scene, so the first time you select the turret, or if you say, so here we have two turrets here, we select one of them, I want it to fade in. And if we then go back here and you can see it's removed again, and then we select another one, again, I want it to fade in. I don't want things to just magically appear. So this is a very quick and easy thing to do. All we need to do is utilize the fact that our canvas is only enabled when we want our UI to be displayed. So we simply create an animation here, just the exact same way that we did with our game over window, that will play whenever this object is enabled. So let's just enable it for now, hit create, go under animation, and let's rename this to node UI. And all we need to do is add a canvas group. Add a canvas group here, and we'll set the alpha equal, and look, she's disturbing again. She wants to be on camera. So we'll set, so we have the canvas group here, and let's move forward to say half a second. Actually, I want it to be there somewhere around here. And so that's 10 steps, and we can do an alpha of 0, and then we want to flip these two keyframes so that it will end at 1 and start at 0. And then when we hit play now, you can see that's just a very quick fading. Then we can find our animation, find the node UI animation, and just remove loop time so it doesn't loop. And let's also rename this from canvas to something more descriptive, like node UI canvas, or just node UI is going to be fine. Awesome. So I believe that was all we needed to do. So now let's preview this in full screen, and hopefully it recorded my audio this time. So, of course, we need to disable the canvas from the beginning here. Awesome. You can automate that, but it's fine. I think we can just do that ourselves. So now we go in here, we select some different turrets, or build some different turrets here of different types. We select one of them, and you should see it quickly fade in. Awesome. It quickly shifts. And then when it's removed again, that's perfect. And you can see it fades in once again the next time we do it. So I think that is a really nice blend between snappy controls and a bit of animation in there just to make it look a bit cooler. And I really like the fact that we have these opaque or partially transparent buttons that allows us to see the action that is going on behind them as well. So that is pretty much all I wanted to do. The one thing that I kind of noticed here is just I want a bit more color in these two buttons here. So let's just add that in, just make them a bit brighter. And I think that just looks a tiny bit cooler. We want that really sci-fi slick look, which you only get by making things transparent and super vibrant. Awesome. So that was pretty much all I wanted to show for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. And without further ado, I will see you in the next one. Thank you so much to all of the awesome people who donated in September, and a special thanks to Aaron Meta, Robert Roche, James Calhoun, Kim Rose Gugos, Bao Andan Duang, and Vixen P. Thank you so much for donating. You guys are awesome. If you want to support Brackeys yourself, you can go to patreon.com/Brackeys.